625 movies that played in at least one theater in 2024. That's a lot of movies. That makes me so happy to see that there are movies coming out every week. That's more than, that's almost a dozen a week on average.
This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett Batty and I, Darren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions.
Garrett, happy holidays. How the heck are you, man?
Hey, good, Darren. Good to see you. Merry Christmas to you and happy holidays and on, because here we go.
I know, it's nuts. It's December. I thought it was just November. It's moving too fast. I'm not ready for the year to be over and for the holidays, but here we are. Can't do anything about it.
It keeps getting away from us. This month is going fast, and I still have some Christmas shopping to do, so we might have to make this episode really short.
Okay, yeah, you got to go get to Target or something before they open.
No, man, it's good to see you. It's good. I'm excited about this episode. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, man, this has been one of the highlights of this year. We started this in June, I think, and really just have been going strong for week after week after week. And now we're in the second season. We're probably crossed 30 episodes. Like, we've got hundreds of people, maybe thousands at this point, who have listened to us. I haven't looked at the data in a while, but I know that it's impacting the people we want it to impact, which are filmmakers. And so I get messages every, a couple times a week at this point of people sending me an email or commenting on a LinkedIn post saying, man, your podcast is amazing, by the way, or it's been really helpful, by the way. I got one yesterday from a friend who I worked on a project with over 10 years ago, and I haven't talked to him very much since, but he's like, dude, I just had to say, your podcast has been amazing this year. I've been developing some projects, and I've been really just going through every episode and then applying it to what I'm working on. And I'm like, that's the best thing ever.
Yeah, it is. And I'm so glad to hear that. It's fun to, again, 6 months ago, we weren't talking about doing a podcast. I mean, it just kind of came up out of us wanting to, I guess, share the experience and promote the release of our films this year.
Yeah.
But it has become, I've been so grateful for our listeners, those that reach out. And, this last week I was on the call with somebody that had, heard the podcast. And then on Thursday, I'm going to go present at a school. And it's all a result of just trying to share the experience and be on this journey with other independent filmmakers. I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, with that spirit in mind, I think today we're talking about kind of a recap of 2024. This will be our last episode this year. We're going to take the Christmas, New Year's week off, and we'll be back, first week of January for everybody. But it's a good time to reflect and really to think about what are we going into 2025 with where's our mindset at? What are our goals? What projects are we working on? Those things. So it's a nice little recap episode. I think we kick things off with celebrating a lot of awesome things that happened this year. So where do you want to start?
Well, should we look at some box office highlights just for independent film and faith film? And I've enjoyed talking about box office with you each week and kind of breaking down the numbers and the data and saying, hey, what's the best way for an independent film to release in theaters and break into that top 10 or at least what should the goals be? But there have been some great box office highlights, great independent film representation in the domestic box office.
Yeah. And just to reinforce how much we love this stuff, we were supposed to start recording 35 minutes ago, and we spent the first 30 minutes looking at the data and going, well, this isn't going in the podcast, but this is interesting. What about this link? And so we just love this stuff. It's in our DNA, apparently. But yeah, one of the numbers that stuck out to me was that there were at least, as far as we can count on the internet, 625 movies that played in at least one theater in 2024. That's a lot of movies. That makes me so happy to see that there are movies coming out every week. That's more than, that's almost a dozen a week on average. And some of them came on one screen for a weekend, and others played on 4,400 screens for 3 months or whatever it is. But I love that. I love that there's that many movies coming out every year.
It's exciting. It's also, you just have to accept that there's no way you can watch everything or be aware of everything or keep up with everything. um, it definitely creates lots of little like kind of siloed niche audiences and say, boy, I can always find something I want to watch, and so that's a good thing. It presents its challenges of saying, oh, well, as an independent film, how do we get more screens and put more movies out there? There are already 625, and so if you were to reset the box office every single weekend, that's enough to basically have 10 new films each weekend. It is a highlight that there are that many films, including, some of our listeners and some of our films that were in the box office this weekend or this year. That's awesome. We've talked a lot about faith-based film just because of the nature of the films that we've released this past year. And so I think a highlight is, in the box office, there were some great faith-based movies, everything from Unsung Hero to Escape from Germany, Cabrini, Ordinary Angels, The Chosen. Season 4 is out there, and then certainly can't forget to mention The Carpenter and Faith of Angels. These are all just some wonderful highlights.
Yeah, it was a good year for indies, and I think a good year for faith-based film. It got a lot of attention. We saw, because we were paying attention to it, right? Saw a lot of outlets writing about this resurgence, or this, not really dominance, but this awareness of faith-based films. There's a lot that's happening in the world, and it was really cool to see how many films came out and how many crossed 10 million, 20 million, even $30 million in the box office. You're talking about 1, 2, 3 million people seeing a movie in theaters. That's really exciting. I mean, that's an audience that you can tap into if you're a faith-based, right? You can say, well, look, we know that there are at least 3 million people out there that went and saw this other movie. And so how do we reach them? How do we do that? It's exciting that the market for a certain genre is expanding. So that all shows me like good things in the future.
As an independent filmmaker, I get very excited because the data is there. Like, it is available to us, and there really isn't a case to be made for, oh, these movies don't go to theaters or whatever the thing is. And so you certainly have to be wise and build your budget and your story around, what they can do, what they're doing in theaters. But to say they don't go in theaters is really not.
Well, thinking about distribution, here's another highlight, or thing we wanted to highlight, is we've got some indies in the top 10 distributors for 2024. So, you've got your big 4 or 5, your Universal, Walt Disney, Warner Brothers, Sony, Paramount. They're your top 5 almost every year. And then you've got number 6 and 7 are 20th Century Studios and Amazon. Then you kind of get into these mini majors, and really Amazon's a mini major. So you have Amazon MGM, and then Lionsgate. And then you've got these two like newer distributors that are in the top 10, A24 and Neon. They both had really good years. A24, they both released 17 movies. A24 did 193 million in the box office, representing 2.4% market share. Neon's just under them at 133 million. Like, these are two fairly new, like within the last maybe 5 years, distributors, and they're releasing more than one film a month and crossing, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 figures in box office. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And I think too, we need to also highlight that, like, you've got some indies right on the tail there. You've got Angel Studios in the 14th place, and Cineverse in 13th place, Fathom Events in 12th place. Like, it's expanding what's possible in the marketplace. There's more buyers, there's more distributors, there's more people that are making up like that 1% or so of the market share. And if you can get 1% of market share, I mean, that represents like $100 million. So that's not
Yeah, yeah, right. That 1.6% on focus features. And Darren, when you were pointing out this data earlier, before we got on, to me, as an independent filmmaker, I look at this and say, boy, I don't, there's no reason I couldn't reach out to Lionsgate or A24 or Neon. They put each one of those distributors put 17 movies into theaters last year, released 17 movies.
Yeah.
You got Focus and Fathom right on their tails with 13 and 15. And then skip down, even number 14 is Angel Studios, put 6 theaters. Their goal this year is to do 12. They're doing one a month.
Oh, wow.
And so all of, here's a list of distributors, smaller distributors. You got IFC, Mubi, Roadside Attractions, each with, over 10. There's 15. These are movies that they are releasing into theaters and making money on it. And so it says a lot for maybe, hey, we don't need to do this on our own. Yes, independent film can have theatrical distribution, and here are a handful of companies that look for independent film.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can put the link in the show notes, but here's a link of 119 distributors that put at least one movie in theaters. There's 89 of them that made at least six figures in theaters. There's 61 that made at least $1 million in theaters. And we keep going. There's 28 that did 10 million plus in theaters, and there are 11 that did over 100 million in theaters. So yeah, I think we always talk about mindset in this show. And every time I hear people talk about like how it's not possible, it's like, but look at all the opportunity there is. Yeah, it might be hard. Yeah, maybe you don't have the leverage yet to get in with Focus Features or Angel Studios or Bleecker Street, IFC Films, whatever. But you can work toward that. Like if you know that's the goal and you know IFC Films is doing 20 movies a year, that's doable, right? You just have to think about what kind of movies does IFC Films acquire or distribute, and how do I become better than the other? Like, how do I become one of the top 20 on their list of potential movies to distribute? Yeah, I'm making it sound really easy, but it's simple. It may not be easy, but it's simple. Like it's
there.
demand.
There's a pathway.
There's a pathway. It's not impossible. So to me, it's exciting.
The other thing that's exciting, I look at this list and you say, look, there are a number, in these top 60 distributors. And again, the list is 119 distributors. This is on the-numbers.com. There are a number of distributors that have just one or two films in theaters. And I think I look at that and I say, well, these are independent filmmakers, or these are independent filmmakers that have partnered with an independent distributor that said, look, let's try this. Showbiz Direct released Reagan. That's three guys that got together and said, hey, we're done, having other people distribute our movies. We are now going to use our experience, our industry knowledge, and distribute this film into theaters. So they raised money and put it into theaters, and it did almost $30 million. You've got Susan Tuckett Media, who she used to work with Purdy before Purdy had new ownership. And so a filmmaker reached out to Susan Tuckett. We interviewed both Susan and TC on the podcast. And we see Susan Tuckett with a film. She's actually done 2 this year. But again, like even as an independent film, if I go to one of these Bleecker Streets or IFC or whatever I can't get in there at this point, there's an opportunity to say, who's working, who can help me get a movie in the theaters, and you can do this independently.
Yeah, I love it. I love it a lot. And I've just counted, there's like 57 of the 119 released one movie. And
Right.
so that's half the distributors. So that's the other route too of like, is there room for 120 distributors next year? Yeah. Like you could release your own film, right? There's platforms out there that give you the access and give you the tracking and give you the contacts and those things that you can pay for, and you can start making calls to theaters. And hey, if you get your movie in 5 theaters in your city or your state and you do a little platform release and you do it yourself, guess what? You just released your movies in theaters. You had a theatrical release, and that's great. I think I'm just processing in real time. But one of the highlights from this year as well is that we really understand this at a much deeper level than at least that I did, 6 months ago. I had a movie hit theaters for a weekend. Amy's movie, What Comes Around, was bought by IFC and did like a weekend release in New York and LA.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a screening in Salt Lake for the cast and crew and stuff here. So it made like $5,000 in theaters. I didn't really count that as a theatrical release. I should. It's a theatrical release, but I didn't know how all this worked. And like, as a producer, having the understanding and the clarity and the experience that I have now putting 2 movies out, that's such a huge benefit and a huge win from this year. So A, thank you, and B, yay. And we've shared it all with everybody, so now you can have similar experience from us.
I'll piggyback and ride that conversation as well. That it has been a highlight is going through this experience again. 6 months ago, when we first started talking about that, we hadn't even decided to release both films into theaters. So we put our heads together and decided to just sprint. And first we decided Carpenter was going to release. I guess that wasn't even our decision. That was the decision of the executive producers.
Right.
But we got on board with that and supported that. And then Faith of Angels, it all worked out that we could release that. And that has been a highlight of the year. And to have two movies in theaters at the same time and tour the country, going from coast to coast at different screenings and premieres and events, and just meeting so many wonderful people and fans of the films and supporters of what we're doing has been just a dream come true.
Yeah. I want to tack onto that too. Like, we had quite the year with Faith of Angels. We started in February with our opening night premiere at the Zion's Indie Film Fest. We ended that week winning 3 awards. I forget how many. We got some awards, which was amazing. We released it in theaters, played on over 400 screens. If you count them all, not necessarily at the same weekend, but over 400 screens showed our movie. And it's the #1 rated faith-based movie on IMDb. And took all the 15 or 20 faith-based films and we're the #1. And so we objectively made a good movie that people like, that people went to the theaters to see. Like, what more could you ask for as a producer, as a writer, director? I mean, yeah, if we had 1 million people see it, that would have been awesome. But
sure.
Some things are out of our control, right?
Well, you bring up a very good point. That is a highlight for me this year, is recognizing that I don't have the ability, and I don't have to worry about things that are not in my control. So this is more of a philosophical highlight, but that this process of releasing Faith of Angels and the Carpenter has really helped me to be able to see that and say, look, what can I do as a filmmaker, as an independent filmmaker? What are my limits? What can I do? And what don't I have to worry about? And those things that are out of my control it's been so nice to sort of release those and say, oh, I can't control who now buys a ticket, or certain things are who's going to show up. And so it's been a highlight to sort of let go of those things that I can't control and not make those a stress point in my life.
Yeah.
So that was real philosophical there. Sorry, Darren.
No, I love it. I'm going to get back to, the details here and some of the tangible things. But one of my big takeaways from being in the data every week with you on the podcast is seeing like the power of an audience. You've got Cineverse and Angel Studios right there in number 13 and 14 distributors. And I think more than anyone else, I think maybe A24 does some of this stuff too, but I haven't seen as much of it. I know the big studios do this stuff, but building an audience and owning your channels, your ability to reach that audience for free, right? You've got Angel Studios. They have something like 400,000 members of their guild, which are paying members, like paid subscribers to watch the stuff on streaming, but also be able to like vote on the movies that get made. They have hundreds of thousands of people. And my best guess is that their email list is in the tens of millions of people that they can reach. And you look at each one of their movies, they can basically guarantee that 1 million people are going to show up to go see the movie in theaters, which is amazing. But then Cineverse did the same thing. They came out with one movie this year. They did Terrifier 3, but you look at the power of an audience. This is the third movie in a franchise. And the reason that they greenlit it and the reason that it did so well is because they had demand that they could measure from an audience of people. And they own a lot of channels. They own a couple of websites. They own some blogs. They own distribution things. They own streaming things. Like the dude that we need to have, Chris McGurk, on the podcast. We were trying to in season 1, and he went and escaped to Germany, I think, during the election. And so we need to have him not back on. We need to get him back to the States so we can have him on our show and talk about this stuff, because they were able to reach millions of people. They had 5 million people go see that movie in
5
theaters.
million tickets sold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and probably more because you got the discount Tuesdays and stuff. So it's probably 5.5 million people that went and, oh, it says right there, 5 million tickets sold. Amazing, right? So good on them for doing it. My gosh, like it's just so fun to see the power of an audience. And, Angel started this stuff years ago. It's not like last year where they started this. And same with Cineverse. We're talking 5 and 10 years ago that they've been building these things. We started building audience this year. So what's it going to look like in 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 years from now? I'm excited for the power of the audience we're building through the show, through 3Coin, through what I'm doing. Like, it's very exciting.
Darren, I shared kind of a personal thing with, just kind of this realization. And I think it's fine to share some personal highlights. I know you've been working on a side hustle. I don't want to call it a side hustle because it's your main gig, but with the amount of time you're working on that, do you want to share a highlight about that?
I do. It's been such an interesting process. A year and a half ago, I set up a film fund. I went online and I found a website that could do the fund management, and I set it up. I didn't have any investors yet. I didn't even have the projects yet. I was just like, this is my next move. I gotta produce Faith of Angels. This was right around the time we were talking about greenlighting Faith of Angels. It was like May of 2023, and I think we went into pre-production in June. So it was right at the same time we were doing that. And I was like, great, I have a fund, but I can't touch this for at least 6 months because we have this movie that we're going to go produce. And then kind of got distracted the first part of this year. And then the summer and fall was kind of around the releasing of these 2 movies. And so I haven't spent as much time raising a fund as I would have liked over the last year and a half. But I think I also needed the experience and the kind of resume of releasing these 2 movies in theaters with you. And so that the last, 2 months or so has really been me hitting the pavement, knocking on doors, meetings every single day, going to events, hosting events, connecting with people that see the vision of, hey, let's make some good movies that your family can watch together, that you don't have to turn it off when the kids walk in the room, that films that change people for good, films like Faith of Angels, they don't have to be faith-based films, but I've been really excited about how it's come together. I've been stress testing it for a year and a half. And so now that it's actually getting FaceTime with investors, it's been very exciting to see. I'll celebrate the fact that we had our first money in this last week. So we've got 3 investors that have already committed to the fund, and momentum is positive, and we're going into 2025 strong. And the goal is to do 3 movies a year through the fund. So I'm lining up the next 10 with Producer Fund 1. And then in a few years, I'll do Producer Fund 2 and then Fund 3. And so that's the way that I want to produce movies from now on. I'm excited. I definitely have one of the projects earmarked for you, one of the very first ones. So like, I'm so excited because it's like the next evolution or the next level of producing. It feels like a model that I'm excited to talk about on the show, because I think going forward, producers being able to be paid as a fund manager is a much better structure for everyone involved than just going out and raising money one after one after one after one. Because what if it doesn't come together in 6 months? Then you're 6 months without income, and then you're not serving the projects that you were already working on, right? So I don't want to take too much time on this, but yes, that's also a highlight of the year. It's come together so well. It's coming together still. And man, I'm just excited to start greenlighting movies and producing them this way. I think it's going to be a fun model that I'm really excited to share with everybody that listens to the show.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. I know, again, you talked about that back when we were filming The Carpenter 3 years
Yeah.
ago in South Africa, about wanting to raise a fund for a slate of films rather than just do these one-offs. And I've done 8 films, raised money for 8 films, and it I've the concept of a slate has often come up with different people. And early on, I would get very, very excited about that, and had 4 of my films in a slate.
Mm.
and yet the inability of people to do that certainly kind of deflated that the momentum. But watching you say you're going to do it, research it, figure it out, and do it. I mean, you're in the throes of it, and I'm convinced if anybody can do this on an independent level, you're the one that can do it. So
Man,
that's one of my goals for 2025 is to produce and direct a movie under your slate, under your fund, and I'm counting on that. So
yeah.
it'll be fun. So I'm
Well,
excited
that's
for
high
it.
praise coming from you, so thank you. It's very exciting. I was looking the other day. I forget what I was searching my email for, but I found an email that I sent to an investor in 2021 that was kind of like the very first time I thought about this of like, and it was right after I had done the first movie with Amy, and I saw all the inefficiencies of the way that films are financed and developed and produced and then distributed because they didn't have a distribution plan either. They were just going to go to festivals. And I was like, man, what if you just wrapped it all into one thing? And I remember sending it off to an investor and going, what do you think about this? And she never responded. How rude is that? But hey, here I am now. It's took 3.5 years, but finally the funds coming together. And yeah, I don't know that it could have happened faster. Somebody asked me like, why did it take a year and a half? I was like, well, I wasn't really working on it for a year and a half until the last 2 months. That's when I finally had time to give it my full-time attention. And yeah, when you do that, things start moving forward every day, which is exciting.
Yeah. Well, I am excited for you. We went to a gathering last week of
Yeah.
the 50-year anniversary for the Utah Film Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm bringing it up because it was amazing, again, to see you in that networking environment and realize how much of independent film is still a relationship business. And, we see old friends and see new friends and people that we've worked with and people that we look forward to working with, but we're all kind of gathered together to in this space, in this community that we're building. And they talked about 50 years of highlights in Utah film. And it was neat to see that some of the people that we had interviewed were some of the most on this podcast were mentioned as kind of some of the most prolific filmmakers in this area in Utah. So big shout out to Brian Bruff from Candlelight Media that has the what of his lengthiest filmography in
Entries.
what's that?
Most entries on his
The
IMDb
most
page.
entries on his IMDb page. TC Christensen was mentioned, and it's been fun to be able to this year on this podcast talk with those individuals. And Ryan Little was mentioned. He was our DP for Faith of Angels, and it was neat to be able to be in that community. That was a highlight for me.
Yeah, it's very cool. So, Garrett, looking forward to next year, you kind of mentioned, we both have the shared goal of getting a movie done together through the fund. But what else is what are you looking forward to next year? What are you maybe trying to do more or less of next year as we're reflecting on the year that we just had? How do you want to take that into 2025?
Great question. And I've been pondering and thinking about this for a little bit. As I do in December, I am kind of a goal setter, and I like
Mm-hmm.
to try to come up with things. And sometimes they're always the same goals, like, oh, I want to read more books, or I want to do this. Specifically, 2025, I'm looking forward to going to NRB for the first time ever. Is that what it
Mm-hmm.
is?
Yeah.
I've heard about it. People have asked me if I am going to this essentially faith-based convention for faith-based communicators and media artists. I'm describing it like I know what it is. I don't, other than I'm going to it and I'm going to find out what it is and hopefully build. So I guess the goal is to build relationships and strengthen and broaden relationships in that space that can lead to opportunities for feature films to be made. So that's a goal I have this year. Certainly, another goal I have is to direct a film for an individual, like under a work for hire agreement, one that I didn't raise the money for. And I know that might feel a little like a step back or counter, but I'd love to be able to just focus creatively on what a director for hire does.
Yeah.
Um, So those are two. I've got some personal finance goals and things like that, but relevant to this podcast, those are two goals that I think that I can't wait to talk about on this podcast. The third goal, I'll continue to support in my role as a board member of Zion's Independent Film Festival. They just announced their lineup for 2025, which is just an incredible lineup. And I've been asked to participate in that festival this year, and so I'm very much looking forward to that as well.
That's awesome. Very fun. I'm excited for you because you mentioned it may sound like a step back, but I honestly think it's going to accelerate your path as a writer director by not having the extra weight and burden and time of having to do all the producing and the executive producing, right? You could still be a producer on a movie without necessarily having to have the responsibility of it all, which is, as we know, takes months and months and months of time. You didn't direct a movie this year because you were in the throes of releasing 2 movies this year, and you can't do both at the same time. It's just, like, that's insane to think of. And so if you free yourself up, it's kind of that like 80-20 rule, right? Like if you let go of the 80% of stuff that's not directing and you gave 100% of your focus to that 20%, what does that look like? Holy cow, right?
Yeah.
So very exciting. And yeah, I'm excited for you too. For me, definitely what I mentioned, the fund, right? It's getting the first amount like committed and call the capital so I can greenlight the first 3 projects, put them into development, and get at least 2 of them made next year. I think 3 next year is going to be a heavy lift because I do want like 6 months of development on every project. And to try to do 2 in the second half of the year, that would be a lot, a lot of work, but we'll see. And then raise the full amount is, my secondary goal there. So that's kind of like it for me. Like, granted, those goals have lots of sub goals, right? I got to find and train and mentor new producers for each movie. I've got to start assembling the team that will become the in-house team that is, the a mini studio is what we're essentially building with all that. But this is year 1 of a 10-year plan, right? So it's just the first steps. But yeah, lots of goal setting, lots of stuff going in. My kind of personal focus this year was around transformation. And so what that looked like was I needed to transform or become an executive producer, not a producer. And I didn't really know what that looked like or what it meant. And going through these 2 projects with you, it's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to see now what that executive producer role really looks like. And I kind of had to let go of the idea of being the producer or the produced by producer on all these movies, because then I can't be a fund manager at the same time. Those are 2 full-time jobs. Like I can't be on set every day for 12, 16 hours and manage a fund. Those 2 things don't go together. So I got to step 1 level up and be more of the CEO of the company and the fund manager and the executive producer, and mentor others that are coming up and that want to become producers and do it the way that we talk about doing. And that's really exciting. So that transformation is going to continue into 2025. And I'm really excited to start doing that work. I'm talking a lot about it now. I'm doing the prep work of it now, but like actually doing it next year is going to be a ton of fun.
Darren, well, again, I love hearing your goals, and again, have no doubt that you have the ability to accomplish them based on what you've done in 2024. It's been amazing. It's been a fun partnership. What about this podcast? I've been thinking, where do we want to go with this new year? And I think one of the things that I'd like to do is invite more independent filmmakers, perhaps who we don't know, who we haven't met, to come and participate, to share a little bit about their journey, share about their film, whatever it is, create awareness for a film, but more about the journey of an independent filmmaker. I have conversations weekly with other filmmakers, independent, that are asking questions. How do I get to fill in the blank as far as what their next thing that they're working on is? I'd love to have those conversations on this podcast. I think that there's a lot of value in just sharing this common experience of what it means to produce an independent film.
Yeah, that's exciting. I definitely want to reach more people with this. I feel like we're creating a little micro MBA with film. It's our own little no film school. And so, how do we get students? How do we get younger filmmakers in their 20s and 30s? How do we get more people in the indie film industry paying attention, sharing, using this as a resource? I think that comes with the more that we do it, but having a little more focused effort around the marketing of the show. Because granted, we were releasing movies. And so our show kind of just became a thing that came out every week without much fanfare. And
Yeah.
so what does that look like if we actually were able to reach 1,000, then 10,000, and who knows, maybe there's an episode that hits 100,000 next year because it is so remarkable that people are actually telling others about it. That's what I really am hoping for. Plus, it's going to build your audience, which is the original goal behind the scenes of this podcast. Was like, we need to build up Three Coin Productions and the audience that you have, and this is a great vehicle to do that. So I think that as well. I love the idea of bringing on more filmmakers, and I get those same questions too of like, well, how do you do it? And replace it with whatever aspect that we've talked about on this show, right? And it's like, well, here's my answer for that. I recorded a podcast. I wrote a blog about it.
Yeah.
But I think there's still too many that think that there's a single way and they just have to crack through. And it's like, no. If anything, if you ever meet resistance, that means you're probably not going the right way. Like every step forward for me has been a path that has been easy to walk. Let me spend a minute on this because I don't want it to seem weird or fake, right? So like it felt for years, like the 12 years it took me to make my first movie, it felt like I was physically punching a cement wall with my own bare hands for 12 years. And by the end of that point, my knuckles were raw. You could see the bone. It was gruesome, right? And it felt just like I had zero energy left to even lift an arm to try and make another swing at that thing. And then you look up at the wall and there's like not even a dent. I hadn't gotten anywhere. And it felt like someone grabbed me by the shoulders and stood me up and walked me back 4 steps. And with that extra perspective, I could see that cement wall was only 3 feet wide. And all I had to do was take a step to the right and start walking forward. And that's kind of how it felt. Like as soon as I started looking for where the leverage is and where the opportunity is, where are the people that are already looking for what I'm doing and are interested in investing in it or interested in being a part of it, how do I make the path easier so that it just kind of shows up? Those are the activities that I spent time on. You calling me to produce The Carpenter, and then you asking me to do Faith of Angels, and then people saying, hey, I hear you're doing something cool in film. Tell me about it, right? I have people, because I'm doing the simple steps of posting about it online.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very, very good. Darren, it's been a good episode and it's been a good year, and I'm so looking forward to 2025. So thank you for being a part of this.
Yeah.
Anything else that we need to cover on this?
I don't think so. Everybody take a week off, everybody. Just, enjoy the holidays, put some goals down on paper and hit it hard, like hit 2025 hard. Go after your goals and your dreams and make them happen. And hopefully we're a resource. You can email us anytime and send us questions. Like, we'd love answering questions on the show. So send them on. Let us be your quasi mentors in this process as we go through it together. We're all on the same journey. Let's help each other out, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. And share, please, to our listeners, share this with others who might be interested in this independent film journey, and see some movies this break.
Yeah. See some movies.
All righty. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Good to see you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast and put in your name and an email address. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and be sure to share this. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.